Hi, my name's Jordan Marshall. I'm the Chief Reporter at Building and the chair of today's discussion. I'd like to welcome you all to what is going to be another great session of Net Zero Live. This time we're focusing on existing buildings. I'd like to start by welcoming all of our speakers for today. So we've got Kaz Mohammed, VP of Digital Energy at Schneider Electric, Lucilia Rodriguez, got a bit tongue-tied there, Chair in Sustainable and Resilient Cities at the University of Nottingham, Martin Gettings, Group Head of Sustainability at Canary Wharf Group, and Robert Wolstenholme, founder at Trilogy. So to start off with, each of our presenters is going to give a presentation on the topic to introduce their key points of view and some key ideas on the subject before joining in for a group discussion and Q&A. So please feel free to send through your questions at any time. We'd love for as many of you to participate as possible, and we will strive to answer as many as we can. So before I continue to ramble on here, I'll pass things over to Kaz, who can kick things off.
Thank you, Jordan. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And I hope everyone is safe and well. Just bear with me, let me go to the right screen. So hopefully that's coming through nice and clear. So I'm Kaz Mohammed, I'm the Vice President for Digital Energy at Schneider Electric. We primarily focus in our business area around smart buildings and smart technology. And a significant proportion of our work is actually around the existing building stock within the UK and Ireland. So I'm just gonna start the sort of set the scene here a little bit with regards to, why are we talking about net zero in the first place? And ultimately here you can see on the graph on the left-hand side is the trajectory over time with regards to CO2 emissions and the varying different policies and the effect that they could have with regards to CO2 emissions. And you can see exactly the kind of course that we're heading towards with the current policies in place. And it's really probably highlighting that we need to actually do fundamentally more in this area to try and drive this much harder and much faster going forward. 80% of the energy we talk about as well is ultimately through the product of our own emissions in terms of buildings, in terms of vehicles. And the trend is very much unbearable. We can see here we're talking about 40 times the amount compared to the beginning of the last century, if we measure against where we're going to end up at the end of this century. And then when we talk about that inefficiency challenge as well, a huge amount of our existing usage with regards to energy is very much seen to be inefficient. So we're talking about 60% here, and it can be much higher when we actually single this down to buildings. So in terms of trying to look at our commitment around net zero and ultimately trying to reduce the CO2 emissions going forward, we have to look at how we're designing new buildings going forward, but very much we need to look at how we're saving with regards to our existing building stock. So we're highlighting around a 50% efficiency needed with regards to future buildings in terms of how they're designed, how they're built going forward. And then we're talking about between 30 to 50% depending on the age and style of the buildings with regards to existing building stock. In terms of electrification, very much seen as a primary source of energy going forward. When we consider things like data centers and the vast amount of data centers now being built globally and within the UK and Ireland space, being a significant contributor to with regards to energy and CO2 emissions. And then we talk about the migration of our vehicles actually towards electric vehicles with the government announcements this week as well around this. It's only going to get more and more electrified as we go forward. And then in terms of decarbonisation, we're talking here with regards to decarbonisation of our energy generation, everything with regards to down the grid, all the way down to our buildings. If we focus down into the building space and very much why we're here today, there's some varying different challenges, not just with regards to the sustainability challenge that we see here in the middle around the contribution that a building makes, but also in terms of how buildings are being used now compared to how they were built maybe historically. So the majority of us spend our time indoors, 90% of the time is actually spent indoors, and this can have a significant effect on our health and our well-being. And I think this is where we need to start to shift our energy towards focusing on the people and how we actually use the space. In terms of the efficiency of our buildings, I talked a little bit with regards to energy, but also there's an efficiency challenge with regards to how we actually utilize the space within a building and making sure that we make maximum use of it going forward. And then again, very much focused on today is our existing building stock. So we're talking here in 20, 30 years time is that 80% of the buildings would have already been built. So we really need to be in tune with how we're focusing on the design of our buildings right now, but also looking at our existing building stock going forward. And I think importantly within the UK and Ireland, we're probably seen as one of the highest in terms of actually using our existing buildings. We've got quite a historic building stock as well. Buildings of the future, ultimately, where do we see them needing to go to? So sustainability without a question, and we can talk about how we maximize the efficiency within a building, talk about how we change the way that we're using maybe fossil fuels to generate heating and chilling within a building, and switching that to more renewable type technologies like electric. Hyper efficiency, this is very much focused on not one single system is going to really sort this out. This is about a combination of several different systems, several different design factors, and actually getting them to work more harmoniously together to actually drive a much more significant output. And we talk about this hyper efficiency in this scale. And then, as I touched upon, this human-centric element, very much the case going forward is focusing on how people use the building, the effect we can have on users, the effect that we can have on their well-being and their health, and creating this very much healthy buildings idea going forward. And then resilient, very much a topic of this year in terms of how our buildings have stood the test of being shut down or partially shut down. We've recognized that buildings aren't ultimately flexible today. We need to be more flexible in terms of their design, their approach, the way we manage and maintain them. And if we consider that they're going to be more electrified, there's going to be more reliant on energy on the building itself, ensuring that we've got the right practices and systems in place to help to manage that energy and have the resilience behind it. How does Schneider Electric ultimately do this? Well, we talk about an EcoStruxure stack, which has been developed over the last 20 plus years, and it's focused in three key areas. So if you just want to focus on the bottom three areas there, we talk about products, and this is about products themselves. This could be switchgear, this could be IT systems, this could be BMS systems, and it's allowing them to be more IP ready. It's allowing them to be more connected so we can gain the data and the visibility out of them systems. The edge control is how we manage and control them buildings. And this is a topic around resilience, but also a topic around then how do we inform our people on the building side so that they've got the right information at the right time to make the changes that they need and react to that efficiency topic that we talk about. And then at the top layer, I want to just talk about this ultimately. This is where we see a shift with regards to how we've looked at buildings in the past. So we've got these lovely systems, we've got this lovely technology in a building, but really there's a lot of data that's coming out of that. And how do we make more sense of it and actually drive that collaboration between different systems and different manufacturers on site? So if we focus in on this level, it's really about connecting. It's about connecting them systems, that data up, collecting it in a way that is ultimately truthful, and we can say that we stand by the data that's being driven out of them systems, and then pushing it through analytics, pushing it through some kind of analysis to give some rich data back to the users, back to owners of buildings, so that they can make actions and quick actions in order to rectify where there are inefficiencies taking place. So the recipe for ultimately a more sustainable world, we talk about more electric in terms of renewables, we talk about electric in terms of obviously vehicles, and then more digital in terms of how we actually drive the data and use that data in a meaningful manner on our buildings going forward. Schneider Electric's got a rich history with playing in not just single segments, but across a broad spectrum of segments in the buildings area. And I talked about data centers being a growth area. We're pretty much in 1 out of every 2 data centers in the world. We serve over 1 million buildings globally and been putting our technology in for many decades now across that stock. And we work in other areas such as universities, a lot of other government buildings as well. And I've just flash up a couple of examples of where we've done this. We've done this over in the Edge building in Amsterdam, which is seen to be one of the most sustainable offices in the world. And it actually provides a net positive output in terms of its energy usage. It's a human-centric building as well, in terms of how we actually engage with users of that building, using applications that they can download onto their phones, how they actually interact with the space as well, to ensure that the space is being utilised and managed in an effective way. And then Swansea University, which is an example of an existing building, an existing site with growing new stock on that building. And we've worked with the estates department and the team over there to ultimately drive energy efficiencies on both legacy and new systems. So showing that we can do this on existing building stock, and it's not just something that needs to be designed in new buildings going forward. And that's it from me, Jordan.
Brilliant, thank you so much. That was a really great way to kick things off. Next, I'm going to hand over the controls to Julia. Sorry, I'm losing my voice there, but you should have that access now.
I got that. Let me just choose the correct screen. If it allows me to. Okay. You should see it now. Yeah.
Perfect, yeah.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. It's such a great topic to be discussing, and there's so much to say. But I'm only going to say a little bit just to spark some discussion. So I hope to hear more from you than I'm going to be speaking now. So my name is Lucila Rodrigues. I'm an academic at the University of Nottingham. I spent most of my career, all my career, in particular in academia, working sustainability in buildings and sustainable building design. So really very much trying to drive carbon emissions to nil, if possible, within buildings. I'm actually in my office. In my office is a zero carbon house, which is also a passive house designed, but it's a house though we turn into an office. So a very interesting one. One day you can come and visit when the pandemic's over, is open for you to see. But I wanted to start by giving a few numbers. You might have heard that Nottingham has committed to be the first zero carbon city in the UK. So we have a big campaign, Carbon Neutral 2028. 2028 is very much tomorrow now, especially we're already at Christmas time in 2020 and this year. But this year doesn't count, I'm sure, but it will lead us to 2020 really quickly. So I wanted to look at the problem of existing homes and how big it is. So Nottingham has circa 135,000 homes between private ownership and social housing schemes. About 58% of those are under our EPC rating of C, which is the minimum we want to achieve by 2030 as the target. So C is not excellent. The house I'm sitting in is A+, and that's what we should be aiming for, but it's a pretty good target and a pretty difficult target anyway. An average house in the UK emits about 4 tons of carbon per year, and that's the range between A all the way to G. So if we were to improve all of those 58% of that housing stock to a level C, so I'm not saying we're going to bring them all to A by 2030, because that's really, well, it would be lovely, but it'll be very hard, but that's what we want to achieve. But let's say we just brought them out to level C, they would be emitting circa 2.2 tons of carbon per year per house. But we would have saved about 140 tons of carbon per year. But we still have to deal with 300 tons of carbon per year from housing alone, from one city, and from existing housing only, not counting for any new build. To put into perspective, that's at least 2 million trees of carbon offset that we would need every year for Nottingham alone, for housing alone, without any new housing. This gives you a scale of the problem. If we want to be zero carbon by 2050, we have a huge amount of work to do. And in my opinion, I think there's 3 big things we need to do. And Cass has covered a little bit of some of that, so I think connects really well with what he just said. The first thing we need to do is to rationalize energy use. So we need to invest on fabric first. We need to make our homes and our buildings in general much more energy efficient. And as a result, they're going to be much more comfortable and they're going to increase your well-being too. So fabric is absolutely the biggest driver of this and the only one that can help us deliver the amounts of savings we're talking about. If you were to look at delivering a building that is very highly efficient, and let's say levels of passive house, for the ones that are familiar with passive house levels, 15 kilojoules per square meter per year for heating or cooling. This would provide us with a saving of at least 68–70% of the current carbon emissions of housing. So that's pretty significant, and it's a big chunk of it will come from fabric first. Then we have people. I think Cass has touched on people, what we call technically demand side management. So it's pointless to sit in a house that's zero carbon, as I am now, and open the windows and the heating on. Well, it just doesn't work. So you, everybody out there, and I know we have a pretty large audience today, and everybody behind you too need to be doing your bit. I need to be committing to this too. I need to be informed and understand what's your influence when you're running your buildings and using your buildings in terms of carbon. And I think it's very easy for us that spend all our lives just clicking the switch, which now is, of course, in certain situations can be a lot smarter and do a lot more things, and it can be remote control. In fact, the house I'm in, we don't have switches on the walls because we don't want hose on the walls, so we have wireless switches, and the kinetic force of my finger is enough to switch on and off the lights in the office. But regardless, it became very easy to just have lighting on and not really relate to where it's coming from. What's the background to that energy, and how understanding it, is it important? So we need to connect as humans. The second bit is electrification. We need to drive out gas for heating in homes in the UK. It's safer to not have gas, it's cheaper, and the carbon intensity of gas is much greater than electricity, and it will become more and more proportionally greater than electricity, because electricity is more and more being produced by renewable energy in the UK and elsewhere. So the more we drive out gas, the more chances we have of using a decarbonized type of energy to keep our homes and buildings comfortable. And the more we do that, the more we improve our fabric, the more we make our buildings energy efficient, the more chances we have of making or using on-site generation that is good enough for our needs. There's no point in having a home or building that needs so much energy that you would need, for an average house in the UK, you need at least 4 times the roof space, the roof area, to produce as much electricity, without counting the heat, as you would need normally. So you need to drive your needs down, and then you can use on-site generation to top that up, if that's a possibility for your property. And thirdly, which is something we've been working a lot on, is Connect Tap. Connect Tap with your community, Connect Tap with other systems such as vehicle to grid. Why is that important? Well, if everything electrifies, heating and transport electrifies, the grid energy doesn't have the capacity to cope with that. I think that's one of the first questions we always get asked: what happens if everything electrifies? Well, the grid cannot cope, the demand would be too great. However, you can be part of the solution. So one thing we can do, and we've been doing in Nottingham, you might have been familiar with some of our community energy schemes, such as the one in the Trent Basin or the one at the Meadows, is we can connect up buildings so they can share energy within their own community and neighborhood before the energy is imported or exported to the grid. Working as a community allows you to potentially have a large battery store for both heating and electricity, and that battery can actually provide grid services and help the energy infrastructure to relieve that peak pressure. So you're not only doing good for yourself and the community, using more renewable energy on site, but you're also helping the grid and helping the rest of the country. And vehicle-to-grid technology means that your vehicles, electric vehicles that a lot of us already have, we've had an electric vehicle for years now, and I think that soon going to be announced the majority of our vehicles are going to be electric. Well, they can be part of the solution. They are assets. They have batteries within them. So when they peak generation in the daytime, it could easily be stored within electrical vehicles batteries. And of course, you only have one. But as a city or as a community, as a country, we're soon going to have a huge amount of batteries moving across cities. So if they're seen as assets, and we can use those for energy storage, and we can use them to then sell it back to the grid, one can help you monetize the electric vehicle use. So, and therefore you can pay quite quick for your investment on a good electric car. But two, it can also help to use more renewable energy on site or on-site generation or local generation, and also help the grid to relieve the pressure again by storing energy when they peak availability and selling it back when they peak demand. So as I think as mentioned, there isn't one solution that's going to resolve it all. It's a combination of lots of things. But in my opinion, those three keys, the three things are key. We need to rationalize, we need to electrify, and we need to connect better. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you so much. That was really insightful, a really good presentation there. Next, we're going to hear from Martin. And I would just like to encourage everyone to please keep those questions coming in. We've already got a lot rolling in, but we want to hear from the audience as well. Martin, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much, Jordan. So hello, everybody. Absolutely delighted to be here today. It's clear that we've reached a tipping point. Yet more legislation, extreme public awareness, big global risks starting to land. You know, I used to do an impact of climate change presentation, and I used pictures from all around the world to highlight the issues. You know, you don't have to go outside zone 3 now for those same pictures. Drought, flood, you know, food shortages, it's here, right? You know, I'm so pleased that this is no longer a debate, but it's about what we need to do. And as I say, what we're doing here at Canary Wharf, we're driving this. We are the 128-acre mini city, 150 or so commercial tenants, 300 retail and food, you know, service and food and beverage businesses. We own 27 buildings on the estate, and we have 5 retail zones. So we really have a lot to concern ourselves. We've been looking at sustainability for the last 30 years, long before sustainability was even a word. But we haven't got all the answers. But we do know the things that we have to do to, you know, to make this work. So my contribution today will cover 3 themes. What is our collective understanding? You know, what is the ownership, the involvement that we all need to have in net zero ambitions? You know, I want to touch on the imperative to embrace technology, data, and tools, and then just take a look at the resources and the way that we consider the built environment. And I'm going to challenge, you know, do we use the built environment to its best advantage? So let's go through this. No slides, just trying to put the message across this way. So what's our starting point? Well, we feel that it's very important to have a collective ownership and understanding of what this is. So what we're doing at Canary Wharf, we've set out our own net zero future, and this future depends largely, of course, on our existing buildings and, of course, our future developments, which also need to be zero carbon. In fact, we all will. So we're already looking at very different solutions for these future projects. We did a mass timber project in Crossrail. We're looking at that again for some of our projects. Passive house is something that we're looking at, and it's not just for homes. You know, passive house can be applied to big commercial developments as well. So that's something that's in the pipeline too. Well, as I say, we clearly must look at our existing stock. So in June this year, we set out our first science-based targets, which were ratified by Science Based Target Initiative, and we were the first commercial district in the world to set these collective targets, because this is the point that we've got to embrace in built environment. It's not just about a single entity, it's about a collective, it's about all of us. By the end of this year, we will publish our net zero carbon pathway as part of the Better Buildings Partnership climate commitment. And in that, we set out to reduce our emissions by 65% by 2030, with the aim of being net zero by 2040, which is 10 years ahead of the Paris Climate Accord. Now, crucially, our targets involve our supply chain, and that's why we are partners in Supply Chain Sustainability School, where I chair the Climate Action Group. But also, it's about our tenants. You know, we've got to drive this collective understanding and action, and we recognise that, you know, any net zero target just can't be achieved in isolation. We can only do this in collaboration with our occupiers. So we have a very active tenant forum, and we're working together to mutual advantage. And it's paying dividends. You know, we've just delivered our first BREEAM Outstanding A-rated EPC, 1 in 5 Bank Street, which is the latest in a long line of environmental assessment methods dating way back to 1998 when we delivered our first BREEAM project, but always done in conjunction with the tenants. We can't do this alone. So today we have over, or we're approaching 10 million square feet of certified sustainable floor space, and it's increasing. We've got more BREEAM outstanding projects in the pipeline. And we know it's an ongoing journey with tenants and suppliers, and that's the backdrop that will drive our net zero carbon future. So the second point I wanted to raise is about the data and about the technology and the tools. Do we enable the built environment to talk to us? And when it does speak to us, do we listen? Do we act on it, or are we just drowning in data, as Kaz pointed out at the start? I mean, one of the things that we've done, we were talking before we came on about an initiative that we're running here in One Canada Square to really analyze the BMS and to draw that data out and to apply machine learning on that. One of the hardest parts of making that project work wasn't the analytics of the data or the sign off to actually initiate that project, but it was actually making that secure, that resilient and secure interface with the BMS. That was what took the time. That was where the challenge was. And I think we've got a lot of hurdles when we talk about existing stock to actually, to retrofit new systems to old, old BMS and old things. So we had that was a big learning curve for us. But when we get that, do we then use things like energy intensity to drive understanding and action? Do we maximize intelligent occupancy? Do we think about dual use, meanwhile use, in use? Are we getting the most out of our buildings? And where are we on the digital journey? Are we looking at digital twins? Are we really using technology to really push and test all of the the options that are available and to really get the most out of the buildings? The last point is resources, and how do we actually use the built environment? Lucia was saying about assets and batteries being an asset. I would go even further than that. Do we really see the built environment as assets? And I don't just mean financial assets. The built environment has a massive opportunity. Kaz said, we spend 90% of our time in the built environment. I've been saying for many years, do we as users and occupiers in the built environment really appreciate how much it can enrich our experience, enrich our well-being? Do we vote with our feet? Do we have an understanding of the good places to go to, or do we just use the built environment and not give it any thought? So there's something in there. There's something in there to understand about placemaking, about collaboration. All of the different interests in the built environment. Do we come together with a common mission? And I would argue we don't always do that. In terms of the remodel and the retrofit piece, we've got a lot of experience. I say for the last 30 years, that's what we've been doing. One Canada Square, it was originally, when it was originally conceived, it was unknown what the tenants would be. There was a new thing called the internet, which was just starting to emerge. So the infrastructure that was needed for that was largely unknown. So it was vastly over-engineered. Now, that's meant that in that, since it was originally opened, the amount of different use cases and tenants that the building can cater for is almost limitless. We've got every business in One Canada Square, from a newspaper to a university, and and a whole range in between. So flexibility and agility is an important thing. Can we constantly remodel our buildings? Can we strip them back to the shell and core, or just subtly remodel them to get new uses out of them? So there's a huge adaptability and flexibility piece in here that we've got to recognise. So we come to the conclusion that the question that we should be asking isn't so much just about net zero carbon in the buildings, but how do we collaborate to get that net zero carbon? What we really need is to have a good understanding of net zero for existing people. So for us, it's all about culture and mindsets. Lessons learned from some of the campaigns, the ones where we work together, they're always the successful, have the successful outcomes. So a net zero future, by its definition, involves all of us. And adaptable, agile places like Canary Wharf will lead the way, because they involve the whole community in that journey. And I would just say that what we should focus on is what we can achieve collectively, and let's use the built environment as a backdrop to bring us all together to drive this zero carbon future that we're all aspiring for. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Martin. That was a really great presentation. I'm now going to hand over to our last speaker, Robert, who will share his presentation, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. So yeah, please keep those questions coming in. They're coming in thick and fast. So we'll try and get through as many as possible, but please feel free to keep sending them in.
Great. Well, thank you, Jordan. Can you see the right screen? I've got 3 in front of me. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm Robert Wolstenholme, and by way of background, I have a degree in architecture. I then have a qualification in chartered surveying or real estate. And finally, I have a qualification in finance. In the 80s and 90s, I worked in an advisory role. In 2002, just after the dot-com crash, I moved to join a group of what were clients to create a fund management business, and we built a pan-European fund management business with something like 2 billion euros under management. We invested across shopping centres, offices, and residential properties. And in 2015, I decided to kind of home in just on the UK, my home market, and become a kind of, rather than being a jack of all trades and master of none, become a real specialist in my home market. My real mission was to go out and find unloved buildings, which I could transform to create kind of the most inspiring, sustainable, and impactful places in the UK. That was the mission. What I wanted to do was just take you through a journey with a group of buildings that I bought first in 2015, alongside 7 British institutions. And it's really been a journey into sustainability. Unlike a lot of my far more learned colleagues here who have made it their life's ambition to be purely into sustainability, I came at this from money and returns to begin with. This group of buildings you can see on the red, surrounded red, pretty close to Martin at Canary Wharf. And frankly, these were pretty sad, very soulless, rather boring buildings, occupied for the most part by disaster recovery occupiers. And the previous owner had been looking at a scheme to demolish the whole lot and demolish 600,000 square feet to build 1 million square foot of residential buildings. And for one reason or another, their backers at that time decided that they didn't want to pursue this anymore. And it was put to the market with these kind of CGIs and these images to try and persuade residential developers to take this on and buy it and develop it. And I said, well, why would you do that when you've got perfectly decent office buildings built at the same time as Martin's first building in Canary Wharf? Very good bones to the buildings. And is there a way that we could actually reposition them? I wanted to try and do something that would be different to Canary Wharf. Canary Wharf does what they do so well. I wanted to do something that was distinctly not corporate. I didn't want it to be steel and glass towers. I wanted to create something that would be really appealing to the talent of the future. And I really started to think about, what do the talent of the future want? And at that time, a lot of reading in 2015, I realized that they were increasingly becoming obsessed with what's going on the planet. And what I wanted to do was take these kind of really boring, dreadful places, soulless, surrounded by diesel belching buses and sort of awful water features, and create something that would really dial up biodiversity and create a sense of place. And we wanted to take these rather awful arcades that were a thing of the 80s, all very postmodern, and replace them with retail units cafes, restaurants, give it a sense of place. There you can see another view. The buses, I should have had a bus here. And how can we dial this up in a very cost-effective, simple way? It doesn't need to cost a lot of money. And what we wanted to do was deliver space that was considerably cheaper than our competitors, that would be really affordable for occupiers to come to, and actually would sing to the talent of the future as an interesting, creative place. And we took entrances that kind of looked a bit like this, and we repositioned it like this. And we took kind of soulless, very corporate atria like this, and we said, can we completely reposition it? And Martin mentioned mass timber. We started to look at this as a material rather than using more steel and glass. Can we use mass timber as a way to completely transform the buildings? And we were really intrigued with its sustainable qualities. And we added floor area to the buildings by doing this. And we took atria that looked like that, and we created life. And we put in staircases that were really to encourage people to walk upstairs a couple of floors, go for a walk up, don't just get the lift all the time. And as we did that, we were working with our engineers, Hain Tillett Steel, to understand what we were doing for the planet. And what we realized was that our predecessor, if they had demolished all these buildings and rebuilt 1 million square feet, they would have put roughly 100,000 tons of carbon into the atmosphere. And what we did here was we did completely the opposite. Because we were using trees, we were sequestering timber. So rather than just doing zero carbon, what I've come into a journey to do is to try and find ways of retrofitting buildings that have negative carbon credentials. And that's really the journey that we're on. And I hope you'd agree that the quality of spaces that we've created kind of are considerably different, more interesting, perhaps not as corporate as our predecessors. We took old kitchens like this and created interesting rooftops and rather dull spaces like this, and we've created interesting environments. And then we've got a cathedral of timber. So I suppose I'd like to sort of say that in conclusion from me, it's been a journey from finance and really what's risk-adjusted returns into really thinking about what occupiers want and delivering these buildings to create not only great returns, but also to create spaces that the occupiers of the future will want to be in. And we've been attracting to these buildings a multitude of young businesses and universities, and it's become a place where education, the knowledge economy, is meeting the creative economy. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Robert. Another really great presentation. Just gonna. Okay, so now I'm just going to jump into the Q&A. If I could ask all our panelists to please unmute themselves so that you can all join in, that'd be great. So the first question is one that I have, but it's also been picked up by a few of our eager listeners today. So obviously there has been a real, a couple of big government announcements in the past month. I mean, there was a big one yesterday, but there's been a few with the 10-point plan yesterday and the decarbonisation fund. Do our panelists feel that the latest government initiatives are actually a step in the right direction? Are we finally getting somewhere, or is it going to be like so many policies before it that end up getting abandoned or kicked further down the line?
Yeah, do you want me to go? I'll go
anyone who's keen. I don't want to pick on anyone to start off with. So anyone who wants to be brave, go for it.
Yeah, so I think there's been quite a large number of announcements this year with regards to sustainability and net zero, decarbonisation in industrial, decarbonisation across government buildings, the announcement around electric vehicles and kind of reduction of petrol and diesel, to name but a few. I think we're at a point where there is the sense of urgency maybe hitting home with government, and obviously there's an economic gain as well, and creation of jobs, creation of sectors as well around this. So I think it's a good sign from the government. For me, I feel this is a journey, pardon the pun, but we're going to go on. I think there's going to be a continued kind of mutualization, realization of things that are working, things that aren't, and we have to kind of continue on this course. I think if we just say this is enough and carry on this way, then we will probably have to reset things in a year's time, maybe.
Brilliant.
I have to agree with Kaz. Oh, sorry, Martin.
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, I was at a conference yesterday, and the point was made that it's brilliant that government have made these made these statements and give us the framework, to do this. But actually, it's not governments who are going to deliver these ambitions and these targets. It's all of us as a society. And I think businesses, and particularly leader businesses, should really drive this forward. Let's not see these targets as the end point. Let's see these as somewhere that's going to actually bring us all along. And I think we should absolutely embrace and support what the government's doing. I mean, we need, right now more than ever, we need to get back on our feet. This notion of build back better. If you take a look at, you see build back better everywhere, but if you actually take a look at IEMA's definition of build back better, it's a blueprint, not just for the built environment, but for all of us to drive forward with this. And I see that, I absolutely welcome the statements that the government's made, but I would say that that's not it. We have to drive towards them. It's our responsibility to make it happen.
Cecilia?
I have to agree with Kaz on there is a sense of emergency now, and I think that helps. Is when you're under pressure and you're doing things last minute, that things tend to happen the most. So I think that comes with that sense of emergency. And I agree also with Martin. I don't think the government's going to deliver this. So I think when we come to the nitty gritty of it, when we start to unpick what that means on a daily basis, on actually delivering buildings that are more energy efficient, actually implementing, transforming our fleet into electric, we then going to come across the bits that perhaps are not so good and we need to push forward. But what I always like to say, I'm an educator, of course, and I teach a lot of master students in sustainability, and I always tell them any regulations, policies, and announcements of the such are starting point, not end point. So yeah, use them as your platform, use them as your framework. Remember to think about all those 10 points, but absolutely question them, absolutely move them beyond that, because we're not going to achieve just by meeting what is out there at the moment.
I got one from my perspective, I suppose, as an investor. I think it's great, by the way, but where I think you can really make things move is with looking at the taxation regime with a series of carrots and sticks. I think that one of the great things the UK is really good at is bringing inward investment from abroad, and let's encourage that by benefiting people who come in and do make sustainable contributions to our country. And those people that are not going to, let's make it harder for them. And we know we need to raise a lot of tax to pay for what's gone on in the last year. We know we have to, but let's look at things with the taxation regime that's not just a sort of blanket, we're going to change everybody's capital gains tax. Let's really target how can we encourage people to really invoke sustainable strategies into all of their lives, because they're motivated to do it to reduce their tax rate. Why not?
No, yeah, that's a very good point, and from a different angle, which I think is definitely something to consider. We have another question here, which I think really ties into things that both Martin and Robert were talking about. So maybe I'll direct the question to you two in the first instance, but our other panelists, please feel free to jump in if you've got any thoughts. So the question is, what can we do to influence our customers to make better choices in one-off refurb projects, so when they're not part of an estate? Many customers are often not the end users and occupiers, and therefore aren't that interested in making their buildings zero carbon. This comes in from one of our audience members today.
You want to go first?
Well, I'm happy to. Yeah, thank you. I think you only need to look at Robert's slides to see what's possible. I mean, the next generation of our buildings are going to be like that from the start. But I think that the point here is, what can we do to the existing estate? I mean, one of our phase 1 buildings, 7 Westferry, we recently remodeled that. It was originally built before BREEAM was invented. When we remodeled it, we raised it up to a BREEAM Excellent. And we've actually, it was originally it was one of those dull corporate buildings that you described, Robert, but now it's a really vibrant, cool place to be. It's now a multi-tenanted building, and it houses, actually, I'm sure Revolut won't mind me saying that it's their HQ. They were a tenant that started here at Canary Wharf as a startup in our level 39 accelerator, and now are a fully fledged tenant of their own. And through collaboration and working with them, they're now housed in these brilliant surroundings. So I think it's important that we communicate what's possible. We show tenants that what's achievable, and that remodeling and I love that term you've used, re-loving buildings, I think is something that we need to do. And I think it's our responsibility to show what the built environment can do, because I absolutely agree with you, Robert, that those, the chassis and the shell and core of the building, that has many potential, lots of potential there.
Yeah, I think that you can provide an environment to encourage people to come in, and that we've found that these universities have come into our place and said, well, what we've really loved about it is it gives an environment that makes future students feel as though they're kind of on the way into work. I mean, actually, they're kind of looking at Canary Wharf and say, well, that's where we're going to. That's where our job will be. And this place is a kind of stepping stone on the way there. And we hope we've done that architecturally. They've certainly said they love it to us. They've voted with their feet. I think the other area that we can help with our occupiers to sort of embrace this is, of course, with their pockets. They don't like paying big service charges. So can we find ways of reducing the costs by being really clever with people like Schneider and the way that we run all of our systems to reduce our power consumption, reduce the costs, help them in the pocket. That really helps. It's the other interesting areas, investors. A lot of the investors that I have spoken to, kind of up until about last year, were kind of saying to me, yeah, it's fine if you want to embrace sustainability, that's okay, but not at the expense of our returns, not at the expense of returns. Now they're beginning to realize that there are occupiers that are moving towards this direction. They're kind of beginning to say, actually, no, we want to go in this route. But it's been the occupiers that have led it. It often is the occupiers that lead it, because investors just want long-term sustainable income streams.
Kaz, did you want to pick up on that point there about the way a firm like Schneider can help in terms of the end users financial?
Yeah, I think sure. And Robert's mentioned it there around this. I guess it's the rental yield, and what we see in a smart building compared to a traditional building. The rental yield, can be 10, 15, 20% more per square foot. And that's ultimately because the occupant has this attraction to be in a space which is attracting a different generation, a different market with regards to, recruitment of their employees. There's also a retention piece as well. If we have that healthy building stories, we create that really nice experience that Robert showed us, Martin's talked about in the buildings, then ultimately you're going to retain your staff. You're going to enable them to be more productive as well in their environment if their well-being and health is impacted. And that's really where Schneider Electric can come in. We can basically help to design and help to deliver these systems such as lighting controls, HVAC controls as well, and try to create the information and the data in a usable way for the maintenance people so they can react and ensure that there are zero complaints, ensure that the lighting levels are right, and ensuring that we do actually impact then the overall energy and the overall cost envelope of a building as well.
Yes.
I want to add a very complementary point that is being demonstrated in several places, that sustainable buildings, let's go like that, buildings that are energy efficient, they deliver better quality build, they deliver better quality, they deliver better daylight distribution, and in general just a better environment, and that has a huge impact on productivity. So you can actually monetize your initial investment by understanding how much more productive the staff or people are. In fact, in homes, it tends to be less selling or moving on from one place to another, and that can be a huge impact, financial benefit from investing initially on a building that is a higher spec and will cost more, but actually delivering long-term benefits.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got another question that's come in that's directed to our entire panel. So again, I will let someone be brave and volunteer to go first once I've read the question, but then we'll swing around everyone. This audience member is looking for the challenges and opportunities of upgrading the fabric of existing building stocks, given that 80% of the buildings that will be around in 2050 already exist.
Do you want me to start? That's
Yes, definitely.
Well, there's many challenges. Of course, you have the restrictions of the building location, form, and it may be able to expand, it may not. So it's extremely hard to fit within that plot. You have other challenges, for example, if you're in conservation zones or protected buildings where you can't change the facade, then you look to do internal insulation, and that comes with its own challenge. Takes up some space, you might have condensation issues, so you have other issues to deal with, and I'm sure Robert can also cover some of that. But in terms of benefit, you will certainly have a building that is more comfortable and deliver better health benefits and well-being. And one of the things that happened to us this year is we all realized that perhaps life could be different. We could all be working from home a lot more. And even if we go back to what it was before, whatever it was before, we're probably going to be spending much more time at home. And we realized with that the importance of healthy environments or having a healthy home is huge. And I don't know if you've seen, but it has completely changed already consumer choices. So a lot of people are prioritizing health and well-being beyond location and cost of properties. And you can see that's a big shift that I hope is going to remain and is going to be sustained beyond the pandemic and beyond what we're experiencing now. So I would point out that being probably one of the, of course, you also get savings. So, if it's more energy efficient and energy becoming more and more expensive, you're obviously going to have energy savings. But I have done research in existing communities where we looked at energy improvements and looking at connecting as community energy. And I've had asked people, even people in fewer poverty, what was the top benefit for them, where there was no energy costs. And overwhelmingly, the majority always answers that to do their bit and actually reduce their carbon footprint. So I think if you want to think of doing your bit and engaging with this, do improve your building, do improve your home, because you will be doing a big chunk of benefit to us all.
Brilliant. Robert, would you like to go next?
Sure. Well, another project that we're doing is right in the middle of Manchester. We've got 7 acres. What was a kind of failing leisure centre, 600,000 square foot cinema and a load of car parking. And what we spent a lot of time talking to all the neighbours and understanding what they want from their city. And at the moment, Manchester is a pretty hard city. There's not much in the way of greenery. And what everybody's craving is a kind of oasis of green. And well, this has been a great thing for us to embrace. Not only is Manchester great because there's lots of rain that goes on there, we can capture the rain and find ways of kind of installing that in the whole repositioning plan that we've got, blue roofs and SUD systems, and there's a whole thing of creating 1 million trees in the city. And so that's been great. The other part of this whole piece has been the journey of talking with people who are living and working there and really embracing the community and talking with people and then getting people to come and join in. We've just appointed a community gardener. We're buying trees now. We're buying them small and we're going to grow them to be large rather than buying in sort of big ones which are expensive. Let's grow them and let's get all our neighbors to come in at the weekends and let's help plant some bulbs and trees, and we're having fun. It's great. And actually it's cheaper than refurbishing by building new. Oftentimes you can spend a huge amount of money on building things that it's much cheaper to do just with people. So that's great. And if we can keep it cheaper, it's cheaper for people to rent. We can create affordable workspaces. We can deliver space at half the price of everybody, our competitors who are building these new build towers. And no, let us take the existing buildings, deliver them cheaper, and make them great.
Martin, what about from your perspective? You obviously have a lot of existing stock. What are some of the challenges and opportunities about upgrading the existing buildings that you already have?
Thanks, Jordan. So I'm going to start with the analogy that any challenge is just an opportunity wrapped up in a different guise. And you know, when you're faced with you know, development options, finding ways to finance and is always an issue. So the value always comes into it. If we can, you know, as Jordan says, if we can take an unloved building and you know, regenerate that and give it new value, all of a sudden you've taken that challenge and you've turned it into an opportunity. I think as well, the other ingredient is the people element and the users of the building. And I think if you can get your tenants and your occupiers bought into this at an early stage, then you can use that to drive to drive the sort of change that you're looking for. You know, retrofit is definitely the one of the best options on a to regenerate the existing stock, and I think we need to do a lot more of that. There's certainly, you know, green and, you know, putting that green overlay and rewilding places where we can. There's a drive for that now. The market and the, you know, people want that. So let's use that. Let's use that to, you know, to bring in these, you know, new biodiversity and biophilic, you know, elements into the project. But let's not just put the green bling on it. You know, let's have real. Let's look at the stuff behind the scenes as well. You know, let's look at the systems and let's upgrade. You know, let's upgrade the services in the MEP. You know, move away from gas. You know, I was really pleased to see that in your slides, Kaz. You know, we've got to do that. You know, we've got to move away from that. So let's do all of that at the same time. But I certainly think that for me, the challenge and the opportunity is definitely coming together. People are definitely much more switched on to this, and there's a rise in expectation right now. So let's not wait to be told. Let's get ahead of that curve and let's drive that.
Kaz?
So yeah, I mean, some fantastic points, and I won't go over some of the challenges too much, but I'd say one of the big kind of benefits that we see is, you know, when we consider new construction of buildings, if you measure that, what Robert talked about, that embodied carbon in the construction phase, it's significant, and it would take, you know, 30 plus 40 plus years in order to kind of even that out and distribute it over time. So really, we're into this trend and into this kind of cycle of looking at how we reuse, repurpose what we've already got. And I think that the benefit is very much real there, that it's not necessarily that we're left with a challenge of 80% of buildings, it's actually that that's the challenge we want to try and drive to. We want to make sure that as much of the building stock is really about repurposing and we make use of all of the different space. I think what Martin talked about as well earlier in his presentation with regards to some of the challenges when you start to look at historic buildings, even if they're 20, 30 plus years old, the infrastructure and stripping it back down to the MEP type services, the infrastructure is a challenge. But the point I would raise here is that the technology is continually adapting. You know, it's becoming easier and easier. Think about wireless and, you know, wireless control. We weren't really trusting wireless 5+ years ago. Now it's just commonplace that we're expecting wireless controls, wireless systems, networks, etc. It's just there, and it's low cost and it's easily adaptable. So I would say, you know, continue to work with expert teams, continue to work with suppliers to really understand the current systems and the technologies in place.
I think that might have to be where we leave it. That's just flown by. Everyone's raised so many great points, and I'm really sorry to everyone's questions we didn't get to. If there's any that are addressed to particular people, we'll try and get those across to our panelists. But who I would like to say a massive thank you to for participating in what was such a well-received conversation. I guess the last thing for me would just be to encourage all of our audience members to take a look at the rest of our Net Zero live content. We have another panel session at 1 o'clock. and all the previous sessions are available on demand on our website. The Building Boardroom has also released the first 3 parts of its 9-part report into Net Zero. So there's plenty of content around, and I would really encourage everyone to check it out. So again, a huge thank you to our panelists, and that's it from me. So goodbye to you all.
Thank you.